I was getting myself all worked up yesterday because I had still not written the script for this episode and had to remind myself more than once that season 3 meant no more scripts. That was the promise that I made. It's some bullet points, but no scripts. So we are now in the new format officially because we are officially living in the project. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back from my holiday break. I hope your holidays were wonderful for whatever you celebrated. And if you didn't celebrate them, I hope that was wonderful too. And Happy New Year. Today we are going to talk about how I found the estate. Some of this is going to be a retread from the season 2 finale. So for those of you that saw that and already know some of this, I apologize in advance for repeating anything that you've already heard. The vast majority of you are new. So thanks for being here and let's start talking. At the end of 2022, it was imminent that I was going to be moving away from Minnesota. I wanted to be back in Wisconsin. I had a remote job that was going to enable that. That meant selling my house in the suburbs north of Minneapolis, which in turn meant preparing it to sell. So getting it pretty and all that stuff. I didn't plan on listing my house until mid-February. That was just the timeline I had in my head. And I wasn't going to be looking for a house here in Wisconsin until that had happened, because what's the point of looking for something if your house hasn't sold? You don't know what money you're going to be able to offer, what you can put down. So I didn't plan on looking for anything. Nevertheless, my very good friend Brenda, who I've known for a long time, I reached out to her and asked her to set up an MLS portal for me, just so I could get eyes on what was going to be here in the Fox Valley in Wisconsin that kind of fit my criteria. Now, I was looking for something very specific. I always regretted selling the manor because it was a historic home, it was neat, it had character, and I always regretted buying the ranch, as most of you know, because it lacked character, and it was a mid-century house, which is generally not my style. So I wanted to be getting back into something historic. I was looking for 100 years plus, but I wanted it to have the amenities that I did not have at the manor. So that meant a 2-car garage, not only central air, but air conditioning. I wanted it on a decent sized lot. I wanted the house to be fairly large. You know, the manor was 1,400 square feet. So I wanted something bigger. I wanted it in my hometown or one of the surrounding communities. That was the criteria. And I also needed it under 200,000. That was what I wanted. I could afford more, or I assumed I could afford more based on what the ranch would be selling for, hopefully. As January 2023 rolled along, houses that were popping up in the MLS portal were not great. They were small houses, they were old, they were very dated from the 50s when most of them had been updated last, and they were not challenges I was even remotely interested in tackling. Not that they weren't achievable, there was just nothing. I didn't feel like I would have anything to gain from it. I'm paying no attention really to the MLS portal, and it was like the end of the day on a Thursday, and I was wrapping up my workday at home and opened the portal, and there was another house that had popped up. From this photo, it was not beautiful, but it was interesting. It sparked an immediate curiosity of what it could look like. And I quickly powered through the photos because there were a lot. There were like 20, 30 photos for the listing, which is a lot because sometimes with old houses, especially, you know, in rural communities, sometimes it's like the realtor takes the pictures and shares them and you can see like weird shadows. Like my pictures from the ranch were when I bought it, you know, just crap pictures. The house looked like it was a moment in time. Something was captured in the images that made me so immediately hungry for the house. I messaged Brenda right away and I said, this is the house. This is my house. And I will drive back to Wisconsin tomorrow morning to look at this house. And Brenda was like, shit, okay. They're not asking for offers until the end of the weekend. So if you want, drive back Friday night. We can look at it on Saturday. And then, you know, so I was like, okay. So I did my workday Friday, drove the 5-hour drive from Minneapolis to my parents' house. There was another home that popped up on that Friday that needed a lot of loving, and I figured I'm going to be in town anyway, so I'd like to see that too. And we did see it, and it reeked of cat piss and by law needed a new roof before you could get ownership, and I was not interested in putting a new roof on a house, which was something that would bite me in the ass later. We went and saw that other house, and as we all thought, it was just a like, oh no, wait, no, this house is essentially condemned. So we went on to this one. Now, my house is in a community that, growing up in the area, I maybe came to this community 2 or 3 times ever. I did not spend any time in it. It was not one I wanted to spend time in, not for any nefarious reasons. I just had no reason to be here. I was like, well, we'll see what it is. It's 15 minutes from my parents and 25 from my sister and her family, so give it a whirl. So we pull up from the front. It's very narrow looking. It's 25 feet across the front of the house. But once you start going back toward the garage, the house just goes on forever. We enter through the back door, and just like in the pictures, it is stepping back in time. It was a kitchen with cabinetry that looked like it could have been original, but it was not. These blue countertops, this just hideous linoleum floor that I think most millennials and older can remember this from grandparents' houses or whatever you want. It's something we've all seen. But walking into the house, immediately you felt the history. That history was not just something that was oozing from the woodwork. It was written in growth charts on the wallpaper in the kitchen. And it was vintage hooks that were down the wall of the bathroom downstairs. As you moved along, you could see there had been updates made over time, a myriad of carpet choices in the house, very mismatched woodwork, and wallpaper. There was wallpaper everywhere. In fact, the room we're in right now, the parlor, is, I think, the only room that did not have wallpaper in it. Actually, no, that's a lie. The living room didn't either, but you get what I'm saying. Everything was wallpapered. Everything was carpeted, except for a large portion of the kitchen was the linoleum, but there was carpet in the kitchen. The half bath was carpeted, the full bath, the study, which is technically the primary bedroom, this room, that room, the stairs, the front porch, all upstairs except for the bathroom. So 90% of the house was carpeted. And in some areas, that carpet felt like it was 3 inches thick. And that's not because it was shag, which it was, but it felt like it had multiple layers of padding underneath. We'll cover that in another episode. Walking through the house, it was things like the high ceilings that were speaking to me. 9 at the time I was like, they're 10-foot ceilings, they're 9. It was the nostalgia of the spaces that was speaking to me, and the amount of work that it was going to need. Like, there was definitely visible work ahead of me, but it was all work that I wanted to tackle because it was cosmetic. A lot of it did not look like it was going to be structural things or anything, that was going to require a lot of time and energy. It was going to be fun work. The house was built in 1893. My sister had done some research, and we think the house was actually built in 1903, but all land records say 1893, so we're going to stick with that. But it had only ever had the 2 owners, the couple that owned it previous, and then the people who built it. That was it. So a pretty tight ownership record that I wanted to be stepping in on. Walking through that back door, it was an immediate, yes, this is the house. This is why I came back to Wisconsin, to see this house, because this will be mine. And we walked the house. It was myself, Brenda, and one of my best friends, Tina. I think we stood in the kitchen for 45 minutes just talking about things. They were kind of lobbing some ideas out of, what you could do, but my mind was already a million miles an hour. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And all these things that I had seen on Pinterest over the years that I couldn't do in the other houses, they were flooding my mind with how I could achieve them here. I think the house was listed at 180 and I offered 200. It was a pretty good offer with what I had. I was going to put, I think, 10% down. The only downside was that it had to be contingent on my house selling in Minnesota. And I also wanted to write an offer letter. But because I'd never done it before, I felt like I had a unique perspective on that. I've written 4 books, you guys, and I fashioned myself as an author. So I took my laptop and I went to Starbucks by the mall. That is the Starbucks where I wrote my first 2 books of the series and started the 3rd. And I thought, this is all lining up the way it's supposed to be. This is kismet. And I'm writing this letter and explaining, who I am. I'm a single proud cat dad of 2, moving back to the area to be near family and friends, that I want to usher the house forward and be its caretaker and honor the past of this house. And it was a nice letter. I'm gonna say it was a nice letter. The letter was playing on the sentimentality of who was selling the house. This house was being sold by the 6 surviving children of the original 7 of a couple. Now, that couple had purchased this house in 1952 and lived out their days here. The father died in 2020, and the mother died in the fall of 2022. That made this house an estate. I got some flack in YouTube comments about me referring to the house as the estate. Some people thought that it was pretentious. Someone pointed out in very clear terms, you claim to live in an estate, but it's just a clapboard house on a city lot. I don't claim to live in an estate. There are 2 definitions for an estate, as you saw at the beginning of the video. One is palatial, essentially. It's out in fields or acreage and is very grand, whatever. The other term of an estate is what is left behind when a person is gone from the earth. That is why it is called the estate. There is nothing pretentious about me calling it the estate. I could call the house Rachel if I wanted, or Samantha, but I chose the estate. There was the manor, the ranch, the estate. I'm not going to live out my days in this house. I hope that someday there is also the Victorian, or the bungalow, or the evil Gothic castle. Who could never be sure? But that is how the estate got its name. So I sent my letter to Brenda, got in the car, and the whole way back to Minnesota, I was just thinking about things I was going to do. And then all night long, and then the next day, all day long. And I was so sure that I was getting this house that I was starting to pull Pinterest things and organize them. And what are you gonna do in each room? And then later that evening, I got the message from Brenda, I did not get the house. And to say I was devastated would be the understatement. It was heartbreaking. I was heartbroken because I was so sure of myself, and not sure of myself in the way that you go and buy a Powerball ticket and you're going to win the $1.13 billion. I wasn't that sure, but I was sure that this was going to be my house. Unlike with the manor, where I looked at 36 homes, and unlike with the ranch, where I looked at 33, this was going to be a one and done. We're going to ignore that first house because we all knew I wasn't going to get it. In order to make this happen, I had contacted my realtor in Minnesota, Chad, to move mountains to get my house on the market so that my offer, that I wasn't, talking out of my ass, I needed to have my house on the market. Chad said, do you want to continue with listing yours now? And I said, yes, let's just do it, because who cares? So we did, and I decided I'm not looking at any more houses until I'm in Wisconsin, because there's no point. Maybe a week later, the ranch went on the market. Well, technically it sold within 24 hours, but it sold that first weekend for just an obscene amount over what I had asked. And I was gonna be walking away with like $90,000 in profit. When it sold, the big to-do was that my best friend Jonathan, who was living with me, he and I were going to Australia. We were going to Sydney for a best friends trip, and World Pride was happening in Sydney at the time. So it was going to be the great send-off from Minnesota, because when I got back, I think 5 days later or something like that, I was moving. So we had our trip, we saw the Blue Mountains, and we saw obviously the Opera House, and we walked across the Harbor Bridge and the Pride Parade, and we did all the things that you would want to do, and saw the closing night ceremonies, and I stood there crying because of a band that was playing a song that I attributed to things in life. And it just felt like the culmination of all the negativity of the ranch was done. The day that we were leaving, a notification popped up in my email of my MLS listings. The estate was back on the market. It had been a month. I didn't know what to think. I texted Brenda right away. Sydney is 16 hours ahead of here in the Midwest. And I said, is this really on the market? And Brenda said, I don't know. Let me look. Yes, it is on the market again. the deal fell through. So I was like, we're offering again. The house was relisted at 200,000 from the 180 it was originally done because it appraised at that. Okay, offer 210 and this amount down. And I want to revise my offer letter. So I did. And I began the offer letter with me again, because it was me again. Because this was going to be my goddamn house.
Surprise, bitch. I bet you thought you'd seen the last of me.
I sent all this to Brenda. Jonathan and I are navigating the nightmare hellscape of Sydney, Australia's train system to get to the airport. I'm communicating with Brenda and my lender, Carolyn, and all the things. We get on the flight and it's a 14-hour flight from Sydney to LA nonstop. No Wi-Fi, so no contact, and I'm just a ball of stress the whole time. So after the long flight, we land in Los Angeles, and it might have been like 4 in the morning. It was ungodly early. And I have a text message on my phone. It was from Brenda, and it said, "Oh my God, I just woke up and you got the house. I had to reread it 3 times to make sure that you got it. I'll reach out soon with additional details." And I just about like shit my pants. And I'm sitting on the plane and I'm exhausted and greasy and tired and all the things, but
I got it. Oh, you can't use that.
Jonathan and I get off the plane. You have to go through customs. You have to get your suitcase. You have to go back through customs. It was a nightmare process. We ended up sprinting to the plane back to Minneapolis. And the whole while I'm reaching out to my lender and Brenda and my parents and my financial advisor and trying to figure out, okay, now that this is happening, I need to figure out how to move this money because I don't have the check from my house selling because I don't get that check until closing day, which is in 5 days. So we make it back to Minnesota. Everything ended up being fine. I wanted a quicker close, which was no problem for that family. On March 15th, 2023, Jonathan and I packed up the ranch and made the drive back to Wisconsin. We loaded all of my earthly possessions into a barn on my parents' property, under and on top of some gigantic tarps, and I moved into my old bedroom at their house. We did my final walkthrough the next day because I wanted Jonathan to see the space. It was just as beautiful as I remembered it, and like the first time I saw the house, I wasn't looking for flaws. I wasn't looking for bad things because I just felt sure that it was good. For the most part it was. We noticed a weird thing upstairs in the back bedroom that from the first time I looked at the house to this time, which it had been a month and a half, they had painted that room for some reason. Now when we looked at the house, it had water damage in that room where the paint was all cracked and peeling off in a couple areas, but it was all dry. We assumed it was old, and that was probably something that people were concerned about when they made offers the first time around. So it made sense that they would paint that room because everything had been patched up and corrected. I said, yes, we're good. I didn't ask for anything off on the house because I didn't get an inspection because that's the game, that's the gamble. I did know going into this though that I was going to be living with my parents for a few months because I wanted to do all of the work or as much of the work as possible before moving into the house. So there was no big move day when I closed. That wasn't going to be until June of 2023. So everything went perfect with the close of my house from Minnesota. I got my check. On March 27th, 2023, I met Brenda at the title company and I signed for the estate. 45 minutes later, I was leaving with the key in my hand. I drove straight here to the house and came in to just introduce myself to it. Unlike with the ranch, where nothing went right from day one, I never got my moment, which I know I bitched about a lot in the last season of this channel. I never got my moment with that house, and here I was getting it, and I was going to be able to do it entirely on my terms. So I had a smudge stick of sage, and I came in the house and diligently took pictures of every room from every angle because, as we know, I didn't do that in the first 2 houses, but I stupidly did not do a video walkthrough of the house before any work was done. You'd think the 3rd time was the charm, that I would just remember to do all these things. I didn't. And so here we are. So there's no video walkthrough, unfortunately, but I do have photos. After going through the house and just very quietly doing everything, very quietly, and smudging, and going room to room and just kind of thinking with intent as I'm waving my magic wand of sage and peppermint, I think, and trying not to get embers on the carpet and trying not to burn, my nice new house down. And then after I was done smudging, I did what is customary for me. I set up my phone. I set it up against the bench of the piano that was left behind, and I propped myself against the stairwell just as I had done at the manor. And I took this photo to capture the moment in time of what the estate was on that day. I had no idea what I was going to find a few days later. I had no idea how bad it was going to get here in a very short amount of time. But it has been nearly 2 years. And I can tell you, I have never been happier living in a space than I do here at the estate. I love this house. I love my neighborhood. I love the community that I'm in. You come up against bumps, right? You come up against roadblocks and issues and financial struggles. That's just what is for your plate with your house. That's not including relationship issues, which, there has been no relationship while in this house. So I refer to relationship issues as like friendship stuff. There are health issues with family, health issues of my own. I had to have carpal tunnel surgery not long after buying the house. That all makes it even more worth it, I think, because to quote one of my favorite lines from a movie in Vanilla Sky, the sweet can never be as sweet without the sour. But I'm here and I have no plans of selling the house. And I am so excited to occupy this space now and to share it and to dive back in to everything that has happened here. Some of it I'm scared to talk about because I just know that people are gonna shit the bed that I painted original woodwork. And I'm gonna defend myself until my dying breath on this. And I'm gonna prove a point in the next video too about what original woodwork in this house was like and how it was only in 2 rooms and a part of another. The test is going to be having you guys identify what was original and what wasn't, because I bet you're not going to be able to tell. So that being said, I am very humbled by the attention my Christmas videos drew and the Halloween videos. And I am so grateful for all of you that are here and that want to know more. I'm sorry that this channel is not going to be as craft devoted as those videos were, at least not until Halloween again, but that has inspired me to start making additional content to share with you guys and try to keep you as interested as I can as we go through what I consider as interesting, like gutting the kitchen to the studs from the walls to the ceiling. But that's interesting. So that being said, next week, we are going to start diving in on what the game plan was. We've got the game plan for the downstairs, for the entire upstairs, and then the game plan for outside. I would say from that initial game plan, it's about 90% done. The 10% that's not was just stuff that kind of popped into my head as time went along. But phase 1 of this house was completed this past September when I refinanced it. We'll talk about all of this later at another time. Don't worry about it today. We can start talking after that about phase 2 and what phase 2 looks like, because phase 1 was getting the basics out of the way. Some people might roll their eyes at what I consider basics, but so that is all I've got for you today. Thank you so much for joining and for watching and listening. If you have any questions on anything that you saw or heard in the video today and want further details and you just can't wait for the next video, let me know below. Make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe as well. That way you are reminded every Wednesday morning when a new episode drops, like next week, which I just said which is what the game plan was. This was really hard to do without a script, but I'm happier that I didn't have one, I guess. I don't know. Let me know what you think. Was this unhinged? I don't know. It could be. So until next week, take care. Happy New Year from the estate, and I will see you soon.